Now it's time for the first unit of Module 3. As some research claims, games help motivate students to participate more actively, develop their social and emotional intelligence, and teach them to take risks. As an educator, I should admit that the role of games is hard to overestimate, as it is a natural way of learning. As a teacher who works with teenagers, I understand that games for the sake of games will hardly work, but if they are used effectively, with a big idea in mind, they can be valuable tools for achieving the best results. In the first unit of this module, you will learn what gamification is. You will consider pros and cons of using game elements in your lessons to benefit your teens' learning, and identify the cases when applying game components, mechanics, and dynamics is not appropriate. In a nutshell, this unit could help you reflect on your own experience connected with games, learn about more effective ways of using them in a more player-friendly mode. Today's schools are facing more and more problems with students' motivation and engagement. Incorporating game elements into educational settings or gamification sounds like a good idea, but to be able to do this, we should understand what exactly gamification is, what are its functions, if just using a game can be called gamification, and what benefits and pitfalls of gamification we can encounter. With more and more activity moving online, we have to find extra tools and methods to provide better results. Gamification sounds like a fancy word, while teachers and educators have been using games for teaching for many years. In this module, we will try to find out what gamification actually means and if it is something beneficial or not in achieving learning outcomes. By the end of this unit, you will be able to give a definition of gamification, tell the difference between gamification and game-based learning, explain some reasons that make gamification appealing to learners, identify benefits and drawbacks of gamification. Games have been around for a pretty long time, and many of them don't involve any specific technologies. However, with modern games using a wide range of IC technologies, they provide players with personalized experience and make them suitable for the world of online activities. Taking into account all things that are happening around us, people in our everyday life and us teachers, when shifting education to online model, there is a demand that forces educators to shape their teaching around the idea of online gamification to advance students' learning, especially the category of learners that are hard to please, teenagers. The term gamification appeared in the digital media industry and was first documented in 2008, but only in 2010 it became widespread. The most popular definition was made by Kevin Werbeck. Gamification is the use of game elements and game design techniques in non-game context. There are three components here: game elements, game design techniques, and non-game context. We will focus on game elements and game mechanics in the next unit. Non-game context in our case is absolutely any context we put our students in. Gamification in education means that educators apply game design elements to an educational setting. The goal is usually to make learning more engaging. What is gamification in education? Breaking the concept of a game down into separate game design elements is tricky because there is a vast variety of games which differ greatly from one another. There is, in fact, a range of elements that games might have, as different players are attracted by different things. One set of elements was proposed by researcher Dr. Nick Yee to motivate gamers. First, action or objectives, social aspect or competition, mastery, scoring, achievement, awards, immersion, role-playing, and creativity, customization. It may seem that using games is gamification, but it's not. Gamification is not turning everything into the game and not about escaping from a real world to virtual reality. In fact, you are still in this reality, but gamification is about making your real life experience better, make you learn from games. Can you notice gamification patterns around us? Yes, avatars and levels on social network sites, loyalty programs in shops, free miles from an airline company, local council gives points for using public transport instead of a car, collecting bottle caps gives you a chance to exchange them to free beverages, fitness bracelets and smartwatches encourage you to follow the program to get fit, some applications make you drink a certain amount of water a day or count your daily calorie intake, and many other examples which we don't even pay attention to. Gamification is becoming more and more popular with educators and for a number of reasons. Theory behind gamification is learners do better when they are engaged, motivated, and are having fun. Gamification is built to make students genuinely interested in the topics they are studying, to encourage their intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is the desire to do something because you find the task interesting. Extrinsic motivation is also a desire to do something. This desire is based on external factors. Someone told you to do this task or you expect some reward. Our learners, especially teenagers, are a mixture of both types of motivation, and it is very important not to rely on extrinsic motivation in the process of learning, not to push our students to complete tasks for their own reasons. It is important to enforce the fact that learning is enjoyable. The lesson here is simple. Don't mindlessly attach extrinsic motivators to activities that can be motivated using intrinsic regulators. Intrinsic and extrinsic motivations coexist in practically every classroom, both traditional and virtual. Our students are diverse. For some of them, studying means passing exams with flying colors, while others do it to learn material in depth and in details to understand it better. For the first, extrinsic motivation is prevailing, while the other group are motivated intrinsically. The theory behind gamification in education claims that students learn better when they are having fun, but it's not the only point. Teenagers learn best when they have goals, targets, and achievements they are trying to reach for. With the help of gamification, we can make this enjoyable and perceived as fun. Gamification involves creativity and student choice, which increases engagement. It gives students immediate feedback through peer feedback, progress bars, pages, teachers' responses, and allows them to easily track their progress towards academic goals. How does game-based learning differ from gamification? A game-based learning is about crafting the content around the game story. The students may create their own games or play other commercial video games. On the other hand, gamification is about shaping the game around educational context. Gamification operates on the assumption that the engagement experienced by a gamer should be translated to the learning context. This would eventually influence the behavior of students while facilitating learning at the same time. Since gamers willfully spend hours on solving the game challenges, the developers are using the potential of video games to harness learners' motivation and to apply the techniques to learning environment. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to gamifying learning. If you are trying to make your next lesson more fun, consider what games and game features are best suited for your unique situation. Do your students adore competition, or they are discouraged by it? What about collaboration? Here are some ideas to up your classroom engagement factor. One of them is create classroom avatars. If many of your students play games that let the players create characters, you could have your students create alter egos that they can personalize and build upon. They can unlock clothes and modifications by completed class tasks or develop different skill sets such as engineer or historian that you can turn into customs projects. The other point is award badges. This can range from handing out simple printed badges after completing an assignment to having year-long online leaderboards. When deciding what sort of badges to award students, be sure to think about all of your students. Focus on rewarding healthy learning habits, such as staying focused or persisting through failure instead of simply rewarding good grades. Turn learning into class quests. Give students agency and motivation by turning learning objectives into quests. These can be a solo quest, like speak to the music teacher and collect 3 facts about British music, or class-wide quests, for example, read 100 books. You can give students options for which quests to go on to not only differentiate learning, but also offer them more control over their learning. You could even create a class-wide quests board and encourage collaboration. Connect classic games to school subjects. Certainly, plenty of teachers have turned chapter review into quiz game shows, but you can work with any games you have access to. Consider modifying a familiar game you like so that it fitted certain learning context. Or have students play a word game but reward certain categories of vocabulary words. In fact, the only limit is your imagination. What games do you play? What about your students? Think critically about what makes them have fun and look for ways to make learning fun too. According to recent reports, games are becoming more and more popular. Gamification makes use of gaming mechanics such as badges, points, levels, or leaderboards, and applies these mechanics to the way a learning course is taught. This, in turn, improves the learner's motivation. Moreover, the design of game offers the learner the freedom to fail and to face and accomplish various challenges and goals respectively. The gamification in education, also sometimes termed as game principles for education, gameful thinking, engagement design, or motivational design. Most times, the term gamification makes us think of earning points, leaderboards, and obtaining badges for educational specific content. While all these elements have been a part of gamification, the long-term advantages usually come by incorporating some other rich elements. Moreover, now teachers use a lot richer game elements and incorporate them in learning. These elements increase the motivation in learners. Also, it helps in drawing their attention to engage them in learning through play, as well as continuing playing as one of the major achievements. Here are some top elements which are powerful tools in teenagers' motivation and their better encouragement. They are designed to enable learners to solve a problem, a crucial skill which is needed today and even tomorrow, and which is one of the 21st century skills. Mystery. This element requires the learners to fill the gap with something which is unknown. The learner has to use some information to fill this gap, but for that they first need to find that information. For instance, finding a hidden key to a closed door or a code word. Action. Almost every game instantly starts with an action. The action that forces the learner to make a move. For instance, finding a map, searching a shelter, collecting pieces. The action is used to engage the learners immediately. Challenge. Every human feels pleasure in overcoming challenges. This runs in human DNA, and that is why a teacher should address this innate desire by challenging players at each step. Risk. A game with no risk of life or collected coins is a piece of boredom. A game is always appealing if it comes with the risk of losing a life, a need to start over again, or to lose all of the collected items just because of a wrong move. Such game elements first challenges and then improves the learner's ability to focus and to make a strategic move. Uncertainty. In this element, learners hold no idea about what may come next in their way. For instance, can you solve the puzzle and move to the next level, or you may get stuck in the round and require to start over again. Progress visibility. Such game designs clearly tell learners what must be done, where to start, and how long it must go on. Emotional content. Unlike learning modules, games bring up the emotion of anger, sadness, enthusiastic happiness, or frustration. In short, it brings out the most valuable human aspect of emotions. It is highly efficient to incorporate one or more of these game elements in a learning strategy. While all of these learning strategies appeal to the core human values, they also help the learners in adapting the learning material immediately and in a lot more depth. We will look at the variety of other game elements in Unit 2. How can gamification benefit education? Implementing fun and rewarding elements to education has the potential to completely shift the way we learn. So, how can we utilize gamification to benefit education? Many of us have become used to immediate satisfaction from social media, applications, and games. But with all this satisfaction, it can be tricky to stay focused on a productive activity. This is especially relevant to younger generations who tend to spend larger amount of time on the internet. In fact, studies have shown that 55% of generation of teens use their smartphones for over 5 hours a day. By using a gamification learning approach, we can match the addictive bad habits and train students and learners to seek satisfaction from learning. A recent study has shown that those who learn via gamified education methods score higher marks than those who don't. Other studies suggest that although gamification improves learning outcomes, there isn't evidence to show that gamification drives engagement. So, this is a point to be proved. However, there is no doubt that gamification brings benefits to learning. One of them is motivation. The introduction of progress indicators or progress bars can be extremely motivating for students. Pushing yourself can be far easier if you have a reachable goal rather than having one set goal to work towards, which can be pretty discouraging. Gamification encourages small wins that helps motivate students. Gamification in education is also great for social learning, which can be a huge motivator in itself. There are applications and websites that give you the option to link up with friends and compete against their scores, challenging you to learn the most. The other benefit is fun learning. Gamification introduces an element to play into study, which ultimately makes for a fun experience. Having a goal to drive towards or a new level to reach can push you to study harder. The challenge of reaching that new level or goal can be incredibly fun. Gamification can change the mindset of learning being a chore into something enjoyable that students look forward to. Educators are constantly working to find ways to engage with young minds and learners. There are, of course, digital aspects to teaching and more modern approaches. However, teenagers play a lot of games for fun outside of school. It only makes sense to incorporate what they know and are comfortable with into a learning environment. One more benefit is control and encouragement. Gamified learning material can make students and learners feel more in control of their own education. With motivators like point systems and levels, students have a means to work toward their goal in a way they understand and enjoy. Not only does gamified learning encourage students to feel as though they control their own destiny, but it also encourages them to try again after failing. In classic educational models, it can be quite demotivating for students if they fail a task or don't reach their desired grade. Rather than having an expected grade or outcome that a student can fail, points encourage building up to a level. This is a much more positive approach and creates a more supportive classroom culture. The fun nature of the gamification model can make it easier for students to visualize the way to try again and work up to their goals. With gamification model, e-learning also benefits. Gamification also goes hand in hand with e-learning. Online education platforms are a great way to carry out gamified learning. E-learning has grown dramatically during recent years, particularly due to the pandemic and the need for online education alternatives. Applications and websites are great hosts for gamification techniques, as they often smoothly encourage things such as leaderboards and point systems. Online learning is not always as engaging as physical classrooms and comes with its own challenges. Online lectures and lessons can be tricky for teenagers as it's harder to engage them and there are distractions all around or lack of interest to such form of learning. Gamification is a great way to make e-learning just as exciting as in-person learning. If you try to gamify your students' learning, you will find even more benefits. Gamification is a fantastic learning aid, but it also comes with some complications. Let's have a look at disadvantages of gamification in learning. Gamification methods are often tied in with apps and websites which require the use of technology. There is already a digital divide, and by making tech such a prominent part of learning, we could risk excluding some students. Another risk of implementing gamification could be lowered attention span for students. Young people today are used to instant gratification, and turning learning into a game could be feeding into that. We could combat this by mixing gamification with traditional learning methods. By doing so, we can ensure that students can still learn and work in more serious environments. According to what has been said above, we can state that gamification is used to increase people's happiness while boosting their motivation towards a goal. Are there any stumbling stones here? Are there any situations when it's better not to apply gamification elements and techniques? The answer is yes. Positive emotions such as happiness and content, motivation and goals are among key reasons for bringing gamification into action. So, if we are thinking about using game elements in non-game context, but we cannot identify a start-end task or activity, so there is no motivation for it, especially for our teen learners. The level of motivation is pretty high to accomplish the task or activity. We do not bring on any positive emotions or do not increase learners' level of happiness with our task or activity. Then it's better not to gamify. It will not work. Rephrasing the famous classical author, we could say here, to play or not to play, that is the question. And the choice is ours.